Las Vegas was always loud, except at dawn. That's when the Strip sighed into its hangover, when casino lights dimmed just enough to look tired, and when Angela Harrell's corner of the world, Sweet Treat Bakery, came to life in quiet clinks of mixing bowls and the warm hush of cinnamon rolling through vents. Angela had worked the early shift for 6 years, ever since Mrs. Devlin retired and left for the morning ovens. She liked the silence. It gave her time to think, to pray, and to remember. By the time the city stretched awake, Angela would already be wrist-deep in flour, her favorite playlist humming low, mostly 70s soul and gospel tunes her mom used to sing along to in the car. She was known around the block as the pastry saint. Old men from the gym swore her pecan pie cured arthritis. Young moms claimed her scones were better than therapy. But what most people didn't see was what happened between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m., just after she opened the back door to let the desert air in and before anyone else showed up. Every morning, without fail, Angela packed a small box with a slice of whatever was fresh, a wedge of blueberry pie, a caramel apple tart, sometimes just 2 simple buttermilk biscuits. Alongside it, she placed a thermos of hot coffee, black, and tucked in a folded card, usually with a short note. Then she walked it out back to the edge of the alley, where the shadows clung a little tighter, and placed it gently on the crate beside the rusted chain-link fence, a makeshift spot she had dusted off with a dish rag long ago. The crate belonged to a man no one talked about, at least not kindly. Billy. He slept under a green army tarp, tucked behind a dumpster near the empty lot. Sometimes she could hear the wheeze of his breath from the kitchen if it was quiet enough. Once or twice, she'd glimpsed his outline when she arrived early, sitting up, still and watchful, like a soldier in a trench. Never asked for anything, never said a word, but he always returned the thermos, washed, scrubbed, and left right where she'd left the box the day before. The notes she wrote, folded neatly, not a wrinkle, with a small checkmark in pencil in the top right corner. No words, just that little mark, like he was taking attendance. Angela didn't know his full name, or how long he'd been there. The police had tried to clear the alley a few times, but Billy always returned. Moved like someone who'd learned to vanish and reappear on cue. She kept bringing him food, and she knew why. When she was 17, her mother missed 2 paychecks and they got evicted. Just like that, the floor fell out from under them. For 32 days, they lived in a beat-up sedan with broken ASC, parked behind shuttered gas station off Tropicana. No one helped. Except, every morning, an old woman in a blue shawl passed their car and left 2 muffins, still warm, in a paper bag on the hood. No note, no explanation, just muffins. One had raisins, the other walnuts. Her mother cried the first time. Angela didn't understand why until later. That woman never asked them to explain themselves. She just saw them. Billy reminded her of that time, of that stillness, of the look in her mother's eyes when someone finally acknowledged they existed. So Angela kept showing up. Pie, coffee, a note. Still feeding raccoons, Angie. Angela didn't look up from her glaze as the words floated in from the break room. Chelsea again. Snide tone, crooked smile. Angela kept stirring, just making sure everyone eats. Behind her, a snort. He's not going to propose, you know. Might not even be real. You sure he's not just collecting your charity to flip it for cigarettes? Angela calmly set the bowl aside. He returns the thermos cleaner than you return Tupperware. That got a few chuckles from the kitchen staff. Their new manager, Mr. Kelly, didn't find it funny. He was clipboard serious and metrics obsessed, having taken over from the elderly owners just 2 months ago. Angela, he said later that morning, as he ticked boxes on a supply sheet, we appreciate your heart, but corporate doesn't reimburse for unsold product used off-site. It's not unsold, she replied softly. It's purposefully given. He didn't smile. Do on your own time, not on company resources. She nodded, but her eyes didn't. The next morning, she came in early enough to bake an extra tray of danishes just for Billy, using ingredients she paid for with her own card. By the end of the week, the wind had turned. Mornings were crisp now. October's touch had found its way to Las Vegas, brushing over the pavement like memory. Angela carried the box out like always. But this time, As she turned to leave, she heard it. "Thank you." It was low, almost hoarse, but real. She turned. Billy was standing by the edge of the tarp, one hand gripping the fence post like it might collapse. His face was weathered, unshaven, but his eyes sharp, green, watching her, not fearfully, but like someone who had finally made a decision. "I remember your eyes," he said, quieter this time. They never looked away. Angela felt her breath catch. She gave a small nod. "You're welcome," and she walked back inside. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the whisk again. That was the first morning he spoke, and the morning Angela knew, really knew, that small things never stayed small when given with care. Tomorrow, she'd write that in the note, because somewhere between coffee and pie crusts, between silence and eyes that met across a crate, two strangers had seen each other, and that had made all the difference. Let us know where you're watching us from, and if you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. You have nothing to lose, and it will mean the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. Angela Harrell stood in front of the full-length mirror in her bedroom, nervously tugging at the bodice of her dress. It wasn't the wedding gown. No, that was still safely hanging at the boutique, pressed and wrapped in clear plastic. This was the pale lavender wrap dress she'd chosen for a bridal shower. A simple affair hosted by her cousin in a rented event space behind the bakery. Even that felt surreal. She smoothed her hair for the 5th time, her heart humming with anticipation. In just a few days, she'd be Mrs. Angela Monroe. Andre had proposed 6 months ago in the middle of the bakery kitchen, flour dust in his beard and frosting on his hands. He'd waited until she was balancing a tray of croissants before dropping to one knee. She'd nearly dropped the whole tray in surprise. Now it was all real. The cake was ordered. The florist was confirmed. She had even made peace with letting her boss, Mr. Kelly, attend, though he didn't quite understand the concept of warmth unless it came from an oven. She had invited the entire bakery team, Chelsea included, not because she liked her, but because that's what kindness demanded. She also sent an invitation to someone else, or rather, she placed it under a folded napkin in a to-go box and left it beside the crate behind the bakery, just like she'd done with every slice of pie and cup of coffee before. She didn't expect a reply, but when she returned the next morning, the invitation was gone. Billy didn't speak again after that one thank you. He remained a shadow on the edge of things, but something about him had shifted. He'd started sitting more upright when she approached. Once, she noticed the corner of his tarp had been swept clean, as if he'd made a space just in case someone visited. The crate had been straightened, a little cloth laid over it like a placemat. Still, Angela didn't expect him to come to the wedding. Not really. The morning of her bridal shower, as she locked up the bakery after prepping a few boxes of pastry for the event, she spotted something unusual at the delivery door. A cream-colored envelope. No return address. Just her first name, written in firm, blocky letters. She opened it in the quiet of the storeroom. A single sentence sat centered on the card in black ink. "Tomorrow, I will come to honor a dead." No signature, no hint of who wrote it. But she knew. The church smelled of lilies and lemon polish. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, turning the floor into a mosaic of color. Angela stood just outside the sanctuary door's, heart panting, looking at the man who will soon be her forever. He looked stunning in a charcoal suit and blue tie. His mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue already soaked through. Inside, murmured conversations floated around like butterflies. Aunt Louise was fawning over the bakery girls, asking for the secret to Angela's shortbread. Mr. Kelly stood stiffly near the back, looking vaguely confused that people hugged so much. Even Chelsea had managed to smile, though Angela suspected it was more about the camera than the sentiment. The wedding coordinator gave the signal. It was time. As the processional music swelled, Angela took a deep breath and started down the aisle. Andre waited at the altar, his smile softening into something reverent as he watched her approach. But halfway down the aisle, the air shifted. There was a stir at the entrance, a ripple of motion. Guests turned, heads craned. Angela turned too, her eyes widening. There he was, Billy stood in the doorway, wearing a faded but pressed suit. The lapels were frayed, the shoes mismatched and scuffed, but everything was clean. His hair had been combed, his beard trimmed to something neat. His eyes, always alert, now shimmered under the stained glass light. Gasps fluttered around the pews like startled birds. "Who let that man in?" someone whispered. "Is he lost?" A few people started to rise, uncertain whether to intercept him. Angela didn't hesitate. She stepped away from the aisle and walked straight toward him. "Excuse me, is everything?" The usher started, reaching for Billy's arm. Angela shook her head. "He's here for me." She reached him and smiled, her eyes suddenly full of tears. And then, without caring what anyone thought, she embraced him. Billy stiffened just for a second. Then his arms wrapped around her with a gentleness that made the room go completely silent. "You came," she whispered. "I said I would." His voice was low but steady. "I still remember your eyes," he said, pulling back just enough to look at her. They never looked away. Angela smiled through her tears, touched his cheek briefly, then turned back to the crowd. "This is my friend," she said to the stunned guests. "He is not an interruption." No one moved. Even Mr. Kelly blinked like someone coming out of trance. Billy nodded once and found a seat at the very back. Alone, but not unwelcome. The ceremony continued, but Angela never forgot the way his gaze stayed steady on hers during the vows, as if he was measuring her joy like a man remembering how sunlight fell on skin after a long winter. The reception hall was a modest space, but Angela had poured her soul into making it feel warm and welcoming. Twinkle lights strung across the rafters, linen-draped tables dotted with fresh hydrangeas, and platters of pastries arranged like small constellations across the buffet. She and Andre stood just outside the double doors, catching their breath. The ceremony had ended only 20 minutes ago, but she was still glowing from the aftershock of it all. Not just from exchanging vows, but from Billy's appearance, his quiet dignity, and that embrace that had silenced an entire church. "You okay?" Andre whispered, squeezing her hand. She nodded. "More than okay." The door swung open, and the MC's voice boomed. "Please rise and welcome, for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. Andre Monroe." The guests applauded as the newlyweds began walking toward the center of the room, where the dance floor waited. Angela's smile was wide but still trembling around the edges. Andre leaned in to say something lighthearted, probably a joke about not stepping on her dress, but then everything changed. It started with a sound, soft at first, then unmistakable. Boots. The heavy, synchronized tread of military formation. The applause died mid-clap. From the back of the hall, 16 U.S. Marines in full dress blues marched in, 2 by 2. Their white gloves, polished shoes, and medals gleamed under the reception lights. Every face was solemn, every movement precise. Angela and Andre froze mid-step. For a split second, she thought maybe there had been a mix-up, another event in the building, a scheduling error. But then the formation split into 2 even lines, flanking the aisle she and Andre had been walking. And they waited. Not in error, in honor. The guests were silent now. Some rose to their feet without knowing why, instinct guiding them. Others whispered questions. Angela turned to Andre, stunned. "Did you?" He shook his head. "I thought you." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Billy. Hours earlier, before the ceremony, Billy had stood outside a worn telephone booth on Fremont Street. The phone barely worked. The coin slot jammed with a piece of chewing gum. But it still connected, if you dial the number just right. He had stood there for nearly an hour, the folded wedding invitation in one hand, the other trembling as he punched in a string of digits from memory. "Echo 5 Bravo. This is Rye," he said when the voice answered. There was a long silence. "Sergeant Rye." "Yeah, still me." "My God, where have you been, brother?" Billy cleared his throat. "I need a favor. It's not for me." Back in the reception hall, Angela felt the weight of the moment settle on her chest like sunlight. Not heavy, but powerful. The Marines, now lined in formation, stood at attention. At their center stood an officer with silver oak leaves on his collar. He stepped forward. "Mrs. Monroe," he said. "Permission to address the bride?" Angela blinked. "Why, yes, of course." He offered a small, respectful nod. "We are here at the request of one Sergeant William Rye," the officer announced, "to honor a debt he believes can never be repaid." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Angela's breath caught. Andre squeezed her hand. The officer continued, "Many of you may know him as Billy, but to us, he is a brother in arms, a decorated Marine, awarded the Silver Star for valor during a deadly ambush in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. He saved 12 lives that day." More gasps. Angela's fingers flew to her mouth. He refused interviews, declined his benefits, disappeared from every radar. After the tragic loss of his wife and son in a car accident stateside, he vanished. We tried to find him, but he was done with the world. The officer looked at her now, direct, reverent. "But someone found him. You." Angela's eyes brimmed again. "You didn't know his name. You didn't ask for a story. You didn't try to fix him or question him. You just left meals, coffee, and warmth every morning. For years." A single tear slipped down Angela's cheek. The Marine stepped forward, still in sync, and raised their hands in salute, 16 white-gloved hands to their brows. Then, from the front of the formation, another Marine stepped forward. He carried a folded flag in both hands. "This flag," the officer said, "is not for mourning. It is for recognition, of quiet valor, of everyday heroism, of a woman who reminded a soldier that he was still seen." The flag was presented to Angela. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. Eyes locked with the officers. The room, once filled with laughter and cake chatter, was now filled with silence thick enough to touch. Guess who had whispered earlier about that man at the church now wept without shame. Even Mr. Kelly, arms crossed stiffly at a corner table, had tears balancing in his eyes. The Marines stepped back into formation, turned on command, and exited with the same precision they had entered. Angela stood in the center of the floor, the flag cradled against her chest like an infant. Andre leaned close. "You okay?" She nodded, voice hoarse. He found a way to say thank you. Andre smiled gently. That might be the best wedding gift anyone's ever gotten. Later, as the night wore on and laughter returned in gentle waves, someone found Billy sitting quietly outside, near the rose trellis by the parking lot. He was watching the moon. Angela joined him, flag still in her arms. "You really didn't have to do all that," she whispered. "I didn't have anything else to give," he said. "But I had a name, and a story, and they deserved to know who you were." She sat beside him. "Thank you for seeing me," he added. Angela touched his hand. "You were always there," she said. "I just wanted you to feel like someone was too." 3 weeks after the wedding, the last of the thank you cards had been written, the leftover pastries eaten, and the garter belt finally fished out from under the couch. Angela Harold Monroe, newly married, newly honored, had turned down 4 media requests, 2 podcast invites, and 1 earnest book deal offer from a small Las Vegas publisher. "Not my story to sell," she said every time. "I just baked and showed up." But she and Andre weren't done, not by a long shot. With what remained of their wedding gifts, honeymoon fund, and a surprise anonymous donation, Angela had her suspicions. They signed a lease on a small, sunlit unit around the corner from Sweet Treat Bakery. It used to be a laundromat. Now, after scrubbing, painting, and coaxing the stove back to life, it had a name painted in bold block letters above the doorway. Open Arms. The program launched quietly on a Friday morning. No ribbon cutting, no mayor, no cameras, just hot eggs, warm biscuits, coffee that was strong enough to kickstart even the most haunted of mornings, and a sign taped to the door. No one eats alone. Angela flipped the first pancake at 5:42 a.m. sharp. Andre poured coffee. Billy stood outside, directing foot traffic like it was a tactical operation. At 6:15 a.m., the first guests arrived. 3 men in threadbare coats, 1 woman with a toddler balanced on her hip. No one asked questions. No one was asked to explain. They just ate. By the following week, word had spread. Marines from the local post began showing up, some in pressed dress blues, others in faded shirts and scuffed boots, sleeves rolled up. They served eggs, cleared trays, and handed out napkins like they were medals. One of them, Staff Sergeant Miguel Alvarez, started calling the back counter the chow line. No one corrected him. They were veterans, soldiers, survivors. They were also fathers, sons, women with burn scars and crooked teeth, and people who had once jumped from helicopters but now jumped when the toaster popped. And Angela welcomed them all. Billy, too, had changed. At first, he resisted. "No one's paying me to sit in a therapist's office," he muttered one day, hands jammed in his pockets. Angela didn't argue. She just packed him a lunch and left a card for a nearby veteran center under his coffee cup. He went. A week later, he returned wearing a clean jacket and holding a yellow envelope. "Started writing again," he said, his voice half proud, half shy. Inside were postcards, handwritten and addressed to no one in particular. They were pinned up near the entrance, rotated weekly. One read, "Every breakfast is a salute. Every eye that meets mine is healing." Another, "The world doesn't need more saviors, just more people who remember your name." And perhaps the most haunting, "Some mornings I hear choppers. Some mornings, coffee saves me faster." Angela framed them. Above the counter, right next to the daily menu board, hung a single painting. It had Angela was hugging Billy, her arms wrapped tightly around him, the Marines standing behind them in perfect formation, the sun pouring through the chapel windows in golden rays. Some said it looked staged, like a movie scene. It wasn't. That's just what truth looked like, caught in someone's imagination. As weeks turned into months, open arms grew. On Tuesdays, they held resume clinics in the back room. On Thursdays, a volunteer nurse came in to check blood pressure and pass out vitamins. On Saturdays, the line stretched around the block with Billy at the helm, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the crowd, not for threats, but for signs of someone slipping, someone who might need a little extra care. Andre handled logistics, ordering supplies, and fixing what broke. But it was Angela who remained the heartbeat. Up before dawn, her apron powdered with flour, her hands never idle. She learned to make breakfast burritos that didn't fall apart, discovered which guests liked their grits with extra butter, and started recognizing the little tells. Who was detoxing, who hadn't slept, who needed an extra slice of banana bread more than a lecture. They never called it a charity. It wasn't. It was a kitchen, a place, a promise. Reporters still reached out, and Angela still said no. "I'm not the story," she'd repeat. Andre, during one rare interview with a veterans magazine for a fundraising feature, Not Fame, was asked what he thought made his wife a hero. He didn't hesitate. "Heroism isn't the grand stuff," he said. "It's not salutes or medals. It's showing up, day after day, even when it's raining, even when no one thanks you, even when the person you're helping doesn't say a word." He smiled. She showed up, and he lived. One cold December morning, Angela stood outside open arms, a steaming cup of coffee warming her hands. The line was shorter today. Snow was expected. Still, they'd serve. She turned to find Billy behind her, wearing a new jacket. The VA had finally found a place for him, a real apartment. Small but his. He still came back every morning. He looked down the street. "You ever wonder why it had to be a bakery? Why you were the one who found me?" Angela smiled. "I think kindness bakes well." Billy chuckled. She nodded toward the warming sky. "You're the one who taught me that the person guarding our freedom might be eating under our awning." He looked at her. "And now," she said softly, "we just feed them with open arms." Here's some questions for you, our viewers. Have you ever experienced a small act of kindness that changed your life or someone else's? Share your story in the comments. What does true heroism mean to you? Is it found in medals or in everyday compassion? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell because we have more stories coming up just for you.